And it is my pleasure to introduce you to Fred Malik, who's the Director of Fortified Programs at the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety. He is responsible for overseeing the day-to-day operations of the Fortified suite of programs, which seek to improve property resilience to natural disasters on a local, regional, and national level. Since taking over the program in 2009, Fred has led Fortified's expansion to include existing residential, new residential, and light commercial building standards. Under his leadership, Fortified has quickly become the national building standard for resilience. With more than 20 years of construction experience and an MBA from Virginia Tech, Fred has established himself as a recognized mitigation expert. He's a featured speaker on resilience and its value and practicality at conferences across the country, and he's married and lives with his family in Florida. And Fred, we're so thankful that you're ready to just step in for Tiffany, who got caught in a little travel trouble, and we're just thankful that you're here with us today. So welcome, Fred.
Well, thank you, Sandy, and thank you to those of you on the phone that are here to see our presentation today. I'm excited to tell you a little bit about IBHS and our fortified building programs. So we're going to spend the time that we have together today basically focusing on two different topics. One is IBHS, who we are, who our members are, our mission, and then we're going to talk about a program that IBHS has called Fortified that is designed to take the practical learning that we're doing in our research facility and post-disaster investigations and put that in a usable form that folks that are out there building, repairing, remodeling homes and commercial properties, they can take the benefit of that learning and apply it so we can reduce losses. So IBHS is a nonprofit, 100% funded by property insurers and reinsurers, and our mission is to reduce property loss that results from natural disasters by conducting scientific research. And here's a little bit about our priorities and how they reflect our members' priorities. We focus on loss reduction through mitigation, understanding vulnerabilities and how to reduce them. We look at them in practical terms. Part of the reason I was recruited to take over the Fortified program is because I am a builder, and it's important that whatever our engineers and our scientists uncover, people can actually do something about it. And so I tend to try to be the practical voice in the wilderness, trying to keep everybody focused on things that can be done reasonably and cost effectively. We also assess the interaction between the natural environment and the built environment. We seek to improve catastrophe models through our research and our study. We produce new claims tools and help to reduce contractor fraud by being able to look at the damage that is created by these natural phenomena, like hail, for example, and be able to help folks recognize what is the damage due to natural hail and what is damage caused by a hammer. So that's a little bit about how our priorities align with those of our members. Let's go ahead, Sandy.
Yeah, so we've got a fun little video for you about the research center. So as I play this, maybe you can talk about your experience at this facility. It's very, very impressive in South Carolina, right?
It is in South Carolina, indeed. And what you'll see as the video cranks up is our research campus. And the primary feature of our campus is the wind tunnel, which is on the right-hand side there. We have a very large wind tunnel and an array of 105 6-foot diameter fans that you can see there. The fans themselves are capable of generating 130-mile-an-hour winds inside that giant wind tunnel that you saw there. I think we're going to loop the video one more time here. So that big concrete box that you see, that test chamber is large enough for us to build full-size houses in there, 9 of them, in fact. We can build up to 9 two-story houses in that facility and subject them to these real-life stresses, and we can observe how the whole building reacts, not just individual components on small scale. We can look at them in full scale, which is really shedding an incredible amount of light on why building materials and building material installation are failing, well below their design level. So let's talk a little bit about how we use an asset like that research center and our scientists there. So our engineers, we do conduct a copious amount of building science research, and many of the things that we look at the Institute, we're looking at it from a fresh perspective in a way that nobody else has been able to do it before. And I'll use our hail research as an example. Hail, in terms of how building materials are tested, generally there's two tests. One is a solid ice ball, the other is a solid steel sphere. Neither one of those accurately reflects the natural hail that actually falls in our communities and damages our property. And we have made a commitment, because of our membership direction, to go out and find out, how can we recreate natural hail in our test facility? How can we mimic the hardness? How can we mimic its shape and density? And nobody else in the world has been able to do that. And we now have the capability within that test chamber to produce thousands of hailstones and recreate and mimic natural events indoors. So that's just one of the many ways that we are conducting groundbreaking research, and we're really the only place that can do that. We identify mitigation solutions across the building chain. So you've got homes that are being built, you've got homes that are being repaired. You also have the supply chain. How does the supply chain impact the durability and effectiveness of materials? And we're finding, now that we're able to conduct some of these tests in the ways that we can, we're finding that the material, when it's tested right off the line, often performs very different than material that's been through the supply chain and is sitting on the shelves of your local home improvement center. So the research we do, we're able to look at the whole chain. One of our better core competencies is communicating our solutions to our member companies and to other stakeholders. So we take all the things that we learn, we put together a lot of different periodicals and other resources for folks to learn and leverage what we do. We improve public policy, we engage in building code conversations, and we are working with groups like FEMA and local emergency managers on disaster preparedness. And then finally, what I deal with is our voluntary standards. The fortified standards give people practical direction on how to build stronger, safer, and more durable properties. So let's go ahead to the next one. So this is just an illustration of the building performance chain that I was talking about. There's a number of different things that can influence how a building will resist these extreme conditions. Where you build is an important characteristic. How the building is designed, how it's built, and the materials that are selected, how those materials are installed, then ultimately how the building is maintained over time. We, IBHS, we influence and look at every single one of those phases along the building performance chain, and this just kind of gives you an example of those types of things that we are looking at. So why do we do what we do? I mean, there's the obvious answer that, hey, insurers are funding us and they're paying out claims and when people experience losses, and we'd rather not pay out as much as we do. But the Institute is focused more on more than just dollar value reductions and claims. We're interested in, along with our members, in preserving communities, holding communities together. And this is an example. When we produce resilient communities that will, individual houses and then whole neighborhoods and communities that will have lower claims experience, we get to impact that area by helping them to reduce spending on natural disasters, preserving the income tax base. So when people are dislocated, they're not dislocated for extended period of time. They can come back and reuse their residential structures or their commercial buildings, and preserve the local tax base, preserve local jobs, keep the local economy from being negatively impacted by severe disasters. So we focus in our research facility in particular, we focus on 4 primary hazards: wind, wildfire, hail, and rain. We look at the entire spectrum of natural hazards, including earthquake, flood, and others. But at our research facility, we have 4 primary hazards that we focus on, and those are the ones that you can see here.
So these fans right here, was the wind the first time you used the facility, you focused on these wind turbine here, this wind turbine?
Sure. Yeah. For sure, the dominant hazard we look at, and the thing that we're most known for, is high wind, and oftentimes that mistakenly gets interpreted as hurricanes, just hurricanes, and really there are no areas of the country that don't experience the devastating power of wind. Just look at what happened up in the Pacific Northwest earlier this week, with 100-mile-an-hour plus winds whipping through the Pacific states and then on into Wyoming. There really are no areas of the country that don't experience high winds. So the 105 fans that you see there, that's that dominant characteristic of our research facility. Everybody is thoroughly impressed when you see it, and this picture doesn't even do it justice. I've actually stood in these tunnels here, and the fans are 6 feet tall. So
wow.
They're 350 horsepower apiece. I think when we turn on the fans at full power and we run some of our tests, we draw enough power to power 9,000 residential structures. So it is a cool place to go and see the stuff that we can do there.
Well, Lisa is commenting that she's sitting in a hotel right now waiting for the power to return from those northwest winds. So we're happy that you were able to dial in. And even here in Arizona, we have microbursts. And recently, I would say within the last couple of months, there was a cotton co-op, a series of commercial structures that stored cotton that got affected by heavy winds and rains, and it was like $20 million in damage to those storage facilities. And you wonder how those are going to be reconstructed after the loss to be able to withstand any future losses.
Well, we hope that they're going to use some guidance from folks like us to improve the way those structures are built. But far too often, as everybody on the phone knows, far too often we see properties that are put back exactly the same way they were, and people just think it'll never happen again. But yeah, you're right. So this is a good segue into talking about, well, when people experience these losses, or even folks that are willing to be proactive and take personal responsibility for reducing their risk, oftentimes they don't really know what to do, and that's where Fortified comes in. And Fortified is a suite of systematic inspection-based programs that IBHS has developed. We have if you go to the next slide, we have slides. We have programs that are for both the residential side and for commercial. If you look at the left side of this slide, you'll see Fortified for Safer Living and Fortified Home. Those are our residential standards, and Fortified for Safer Business and Fortified Commercial are our commercial standards. And we are pleased to be starting to roll out the commercial standards. We have had residential standards out in the market for a number of years, and just this year we're starting to launch the commercial set of standards. So stay tuned for that.
Yeah. Now, this is the link that I sent out to a video in the pre-webinar, and raise your hand if you were able to watch this video, and maybe as I show this video to our audience, you could talk through your experience, because you were here during these first tests. Is that correct?
Right. So we opened our research center in 2010, and we constructed a series of code-compliant homes that represented homes built in the Midwest. And so the house that you see coming apart is actually 4 or 5 different samples of code-compliant construction, all of them suffering some sort of catastrophic failure at some point during the test. And just so everybody on the phone knows, the wind speeds that you saw causing those failures never exceeded 100 miles an hour. They were between 90 and 98 miles an hour. And really, the difference between those two structures, they were architecturally the same. They had the same two-story layout, but $3,000 in material and labor is the difference that you see here.
Wow. That's incredible.
So it's a matter of knowing what to do and when, and it can be done affordably. So not only do we have examples of what's been done in our lab, but we actually had real-world proof of the success of fortified standards. So this is a community called the Boulevard Peninsula down in Texas. It's in Galveston Bay there, and Hurricane Ike actually came right across the peninsula. Category 3 storm. The eye wall went directly over this neighborhood. And there are a number of fortified homes built in this neighborhood. And if we go to the next slide, you'll get an idea of where they are.
Whoa!
So, when Ike came ashore, it came ashore with devastating winds at tremendously high storm surge, and the houses that you see in the foreground are our fortified houses. Now, we did lose 2 of the houses, and you can get a sense as you look around the peninsula, all of the debris that was created when other houses failed, and we did have a couple of houses that their foundations were overcome by all that debris. But the houses in the foreground are fortified homes, and one of the things that you should take away from our talk today is that fortified doesn't make something disaster-proof, but it makes it able to be rehabilitated and reused quickly. And so that's that we had Hurricane Ike allowed us to prove out the concepts that we have, and we every time we see something like this, we learn something and we improve the standard.
Yeah. And Jerry and Lisa actually got a chance to watch the video before. They have a lot of videos posted on their YouTube channel, so I encourage you to search IBHS to see a lot more videos on what they're doing with fire and etc. And thank you, Kim. Kimberly said she shared the video with their line of business leaders, so that's important as trainers and educators to educate the claims leaders, the underwriting leaders about, what the fortified program is all about.
So we'll spend a little bit of time just talking specifically about fortified home. And fortified home is a resilience standard that we developed about 5 years ago as the home building market was taking its downturn, and we weren't seeing the large number of new construction starts that we had been experiencing. We turned our attention to how can we develop a standard that could be used both by new construction and the existing inventory that was out there, the millions of homes in the built environment. And so there really wasn't anything that provided good guidance for retrofitting existing properties, and that's how we developed Fortified Home. And Fortified Home is a little bit unique. It focuses on the dominant hazard that might impact an area. So, for example, we have hurricane, we have high wind and hail to date, and we decided to break it up into levels. So rather than just having a home have to meet the entire standard, we broke it up into bronze, silver, and gold. And by doing that, we really made it possible for homeowners with any budget to positively impact their risk and meaningfully reduce it. And so we did that by making sure that our levels focused on the systems that were most vulnerable at the lowest intensity events. And we'll talk a little bit more about that here in just a second. Go ahead to the next one.
Sure. So this is the last video that we're going to show today. But again, I encourage you, there's a lot more videos as far as like blowing embers in a, near a home and how quickly fire can catch on. Lots of interesting videos at the IBHS channel. So talk us through this wind-driven rain video here.
Sure. So common building practice has a roof cover that's installed on a deck that is covered with a very fragile piece of underlayment called felt paper. And what we see all too often is the roof cover. When the roof cover comes off, that underlayment goes with it, and that exposes seams in the roof deck that are designed to be there. And so we have a technique in our standard called sealing the roof deck. And what you're going to see in this video is the left side of this duplex has the seams sealed with a modified bitumen tape that keeps that water out after the roof cover has been lost. And this is on the standard side, and you can see how much water can intrude into the roof system. If you take those little gaps, those 8-inch gaps all around those 4x8 sheets of roof decking, and you add them all up, when you lose roof covering as significant as these houses did, you end up with akin to about a 2-foot hole in the roof.
Wow.
And you can get a good view here now that you can see on the left-hand side of the home. You'll see that tape applied to the seams. That tape for this particular house cost just $500 in material and labor to install, and you can see the resulting reduction in losses, about a 300% reduction in losses, and the damage estimate that you see is only for the property. It doesn't reflect ALE at all. So the question becomes, who wouldn't buy this kind of protection for $500 bucks?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you could see the tape.
That's just
there.
one technique. Yeah, so that's just one technique. We actually have 4 different techniques that can seal the roof deck from the top side, and one that can be used on a home, an existing home where the roof covering is not being replaced. So our mantra is little things are important. Things like the tape, ring shank nails that you can see in the foreground, metal connectors that can help to tie the roof to the wall and on down through it to create a load path. All of those little things are the details that we pay attention to. And the challenging thing, and one of the value propositions that we have for our member companies is, once a home is complete, it's very difficult to tell whether these systems are in place and whether these materials have been used. So the Fortified program, another cornerstone of the program, is it's inspection-based. Every single home that gets a Fortified designation and we issue a certificate on has been inspected and reviewed by a trained evaluator out in the field, and then their work has been reviewed by an engineer on my team at IBHS. And so when we issue a certificate, our member companies can have confidence that these things that can't be seen afterwards are there, and that the building will perform better than other standard homes. So let's go ahead and go to the next one. So as I mentioned, there's Fortified Home, and then there's the bronze, silver, and gold levels of designation. The designations are actually good for 5 years. We require that for a designation to stay in force, that every 5 years an evaluator goes out and takes another look at the house to make sure that key systems, in particular the roof, are still in good condition, and then we can redesignate for another 5 years. But we felt it was a very important for us to monitor the homes on a regular interval to make sure that they would still perform as intended. So if we go to the next slide, so here you can see we've got the different systems identified for the different hazards that we have. On the left we have hurricane. On the right we've got the high wind and the hail. So at the bronze level in both sets of standards, we focus primarily on the roof. And when I say that, most people, when they visualize the roof, they're visualizing the roof cover that's on there. But as most of you probably know, the roof system actually is comprised of several different components. There's the roof framing, the roof decking, how thick that roof decking is, what fasteners are used to connect that decking to the roof framing, the underlayment that's used, is the roof deck sealed, is there drip edge installed, then we get to what kind of roof covering there is. So we look at all that stuff. And then in hurricane, we also pay attention to the attic ventilation system. In areas where you get severe wind accompanying rain events, you can have wind-driven rain that goes up the slope of the roof and in through the vents into the attic. And so we scrutinize that attic ventilation system as well. Moving down to the silver, in the hurricane standard, We focus on protecting the openings from flying debris. We focus on making sure the gables, if you aren't familiar with that term, there's generally two common types of roof shapes. A gable is the kind where you would look at the roof and you would see an A or a triangle on one end or more of the roof. That gable is oftentimes constructed in a way that it cannot resist high winds effectively, particularly high winds that cycle back and forth. So we focus on bracing those gables and attach structures as well, structures like porches and carports. On the high wind and hail side, we do focus on gables, we focus on porches and carports, we also focus on chimneys. Moving down to gold in the hurricane section, we focus on what's called a continuous load path. You may not be familiar with that term, but a continuous load path are connections that tie the roof to the walls to the floor to the foundation. And the goal really is to take the pressures that are being exerted on the building by high winds and take them and transfer them into the ground. And the only way that can really effectively happen is if all of those components that I just mentioned are tied together and can act as a single unit. And that's what a continuous load path is. We also focus on, here in the hurricane version, we focus on chimneys at that point. Most chimneys today are really just decorative, and they surround a metal flue. And what we find is those decorative elements that create a more substantial looking chimney are typically just tacked to the roof, and when high winds blow, those chimneys can be blown off and create big holes in the roof. On the high wind and hail side, we also pay particular attention to garage doors. If you can recall that video that we just watched, those buildings that were failing, the buildings that were coming apart, they were coming apart because an opening was compromised. And buildings today are designed only to resist the pressures that the winds are creating on the outside of the wall. Once an opening is compromised, like the front door or a couple of windows or a garage door, the wind can rush into the structure and exert that force on both the outside and the inside of the walls at the same time, and that's what overwhelms those structures. And as you can imagine, garage doors are typically the largest opening. They're covering the largest opening in a home. So when you see a lot of roofs that are damaged, and a lot of the structural damage that happens, particularly in tornado-prone areas or areas where you have microbursts, it's usually an opening like the garage door that has been compromised, and then it causes other systems to fail. So that's the rough breakdown of the different levels. It's the roof, its openings, and then the load path.
So quick question. Has there ever been any studies that talk about the difference in the positioning of the structure on the property to the prevailing winds? So like, is it better if you're going to have the gables that they're not facing towards the prevailing winds? Does that make a difference, or?
Well, certainly house siding can make a difference, but oftentimes there really isn't a hard and fast rule that the winds will always come from one direction. So it's important to build the house anticipating the winds coming from all directions. And so in design, we do take into consideration something called the exposure category. An exposure category is a way of looking at a building based on what else is around it. And so, in other words, if you're in exposure category B, you're in a relatively urban area, a suburban area. You've got a lot of buildings around you, and as the wind tries to attack your building, there are other things that are breaking the wind up. When you go to exposure C, there's fewer obstructions. When you get to exposure D is direct waterfront with no obstructions. And as you can probably imagine, when you get to those exposure C, exposure D, the wind pressures that can be exerted are substantially higher than they would be in exposure B. So yes, we do look at those things and try to anticipate what we would see, assuming that the winds will come from any direction.
That's a good point.
So the other, I think, unique approach that we took with Fortified is that we look at things as systems. You may be familiar with some energy efficiency standards and other programs where you can look at individual components, and each component has a score or a value associated with it, and you can assemble those components in any way you wish to achieve a score that gives you some sort of rating. Well, for our program, that doesn't really work. If our systems don't work, we have houses that fail and people that are permanently dislocated from them. If an energy efficiency standard doesn't work, they might have a little bit higher utility bill. So the stakes are higher for us, and so we have to look at the entire system, and that's why it's important. The way we broke things down into bronze, silver, and gold, we don't just look at the individual components. We look at the entire system. So the whole system has to meet Fortified requirements, not just the components. We put performance first. We look at what the materials are supposed to do in terms of performance requirements, and that is really what we're looking for. And then, as I mentioned, we strengthen the most vulnerable systems first. A lot of times when I talk to folks and they're not familiar with Fortified, inevitably what they'll do is they'll want to talk to me about how their opening is so protected, or how they spent a considerable amount of money making sure that they had a really strong structural system, which is great. Those things are critically important, but the house is going to experience far more frequently lower intensity events that will impact that roof more than it'll impact the structure. And what really pains me is when I talk to those people and they talk to me about how their roof deck is attached with staples or six-penny nails, which are really inadequate fasteners.
Mm-hmm.
So we focus on those most vulnerable systems first, and then we graduate up to more intense but less frequent events.
Mm-hmm. So we have a quick question from Jerry, and I think you're going to be talking more about this in a bit, but are there certified inspectors throughout the country?
We are working to build our evaluator network. So the short answer to your question, Jerry, is we don't have inspectors everywhere, but we are conducting training all year long, and we look to recruit and train inspectors wherever there's interest. So right now, we primarily have our inspector forces concentrated along the Gulf Coast up through the Mid-Atlantic, and we're building a network also in New England. We'll be releasing our high wind and hail standards in 2016, so we will be moving into the heartland of the country in 2016, and we'll start in Oklahoma and Colorado next year. All right. So so just like what we talked about on our opening about how IBHS's corporate interests align with insurer interests, we could tie that right back into Fortified Home and benefits to insurers. So if an insurer recognizes Fortified Home and is familiar with Fortified Home, then you know that you get better insight into the properties you're writing. We spend a copious amount of time inspecting these houses. We collect over 40 pictures of each house that we are involved in. We look at over 120 different data points of the houses that participate in our program. So your company gets the benefit of knowing that somebody who is educated and informed has gone out and looked at those properties. We collect lots of documentation when we go through this verification process so we can prove compliance. We do have a robust training program that we have recently deployed in 2015, particularly for adjusters and underwriters. It's called Fortified Wise, and we're going to talk about that more in just a few minutes. But we do have training available for folks across the insurance industry. There are opportunities for homeowners to take personal responsibility for their risk by participating in the program, being proactive. And I'm sure that everybody out there is asking, well, what kind of incentives are there? Well, it really depends on where you are. In disaster-prone states that are trying to assist their populations with the rising cost of insurance, there are some insurance incentives. In Alabama, Mississippi, and North Carolina in particular, there have been laws written that specifically require credits to be given for fortified homes. In other places, individual companies have made decisions to incentivize the program. We have building authorities that give building permit rebates for fortified construction. There are tax incentives for fortified construction. So there are a number of different things that can come into play. But when we talk to homeowners and we talk to folks about educating homeowners on participating in fortified, we really focus on the more qualitative benefits: protecting the property, protecting your memories, making sure that your home is going to be habitable after disaster hits. Those are the things that we really try to get people to focus on, as opposed to the dollars that might be achieved by getting some sort of incentive, particularly from insurance companies.
So those that might be new to training, explain the ALE at the bottom.
Well, I will confess that I, as a builder, I am a more frequent consumer of insurance products than I am an expert on them. But what my understanding is adjusted living expenses. Those are the expenses that get paid if a property owner is dislocated or forced to be out of the home for a period of time. So those are things that really aren't property related, but they're really tied to loss of use of the property.
Okay, yeah, because the reason why I ask is we use a term in claims, LAE, which is loss adjustment expenses. So I imagine fortified reduces loss adjustment expenses too, possibly, in addition to the adjusted living expenses for those that are displaced. Yeah, great, thank you.
Okay. So let's go ahead to the next slide. So how a homeowner or how an insurer would know that a home had been through the program and had been successful in completing the program, we issue certificates. And this is an example of one of our gold certificates. It's for a hurricane. You can see in the lower left-hand corner, it mentions that it has a brand new roof. So we issue on every home that we designate, we issue one of these certificates, and that certificate can then be provided to the insurer as proof of compliance. You can't see it very well in the slide, but on the lower right-hand side, underneath my signature, there is a fortified ID, which is a unique identifying number, and then an expiration date that mentions when the certificate needs to be renewed. So let's go ahead to the next one. So again, I want to make sure that people don't think that this is just for hurricanes, and so we talk about people being able to buy down their risk in areas experiencing high wind losses. This is a tornado track in Atlanta, and we look very hard at how can fortified help in areas that might experience severe winds like tornadoes. Well, while we aren't building tornado bunkers, the houses are not bunkers. What we can do is if folks are using our fortified standards and just improving that roof primarily, but we're going to the roof and getting that load path taken care of, all those areas that you see that are in green on this track and in that yellow color could be minimized, and leaving just that bright orange area. And what does that really mean? Well, tornado damage is not predicted. It is done forensically. It's done after the fact. It's assessed after the fact. And so when folks go out, they look at how much damage they see, and they say, well, that must have been an EF2 or an EF3. What we are thinking is that people are using fortified home, and we're reducing those lower intensity losses, the greens and the yellows. We can actually lower the overall rating of the tornado and concentrate that damage to just the most severe areas of wind. We can have a positive impact even on those severe areas of wind, but we can reduce the tails. Is the big point I want to get across. We can make the overall impact far less severe just by focusing on the roof, in particular. Let's go ahead to the next one. So this just talks really about the value of having a fortified roof, and there are basically two times when fortified is at its most cost effective and efficient to accomplish. One is when the home is initially being built. The other is when it's having its roof replaced, either as a result of a claim or just through normal maintenance. So the roof cover is the first line of defense. It's exposed every day, all day, and it experiences all types of different patterns of wear and stress. It's the most frequently repaired system in a home, and when it's being repaired or replaced, there are very cost-effective things that we can do to improve its performance. I'll call back to your mind the $500 to seal the roof deck can be very easily done when a roof is being replaced or repaired. So let's go ahead to the next one. So I mentioned training, and we have just released in 2015, and it was going to be a big focus for us in 2016, our Fortified WISE training, and in particular our Fortified WISE Associate Credential, which is designed specifically for folks that are not building professionals like me, not inspectors, they're not tradesmen. They're folks that are interested in Fortified, want to understand the concepts behind Fortified, and want to understand in more detail the different upgrades that we require. That's the kind of people that can benefit from Fortified WISE. So insurance professionals, manufacturers, building officials, real estate professionals, and design professionals are all coming through our Fortified WISE program. And we have on our website at disastersafety.org /Fortified, there's a tab on our website that links to our training calendar. We'll be releasing our 2016 calendar soon. Those are publicly held events that anybody can sign up and register for, and we do them around the country, but we'll do them on the Gulf Coast, at our lab in South Carolina, up in New England. We'll probably do a couple in Texas this year. But we also have the capability, if a company wants to do this training, we have the capability to go and do on-site training. I just did this for a member company in San Antonio. I went and trained 40 of their claims and underwriting folks in Fortified WISE, and we had a great time there, a great experience. So if your companies are interested in gaining more experience, feel free to reach out to me or contact us through our website, and we can talk about doing a private course at your facility or one that's more convenient for you. Okay. So I mentioned, we talked a little bit about who's using Fortified. There are 4 states where it actually has been legislated or mandated by their local Department of Insurance: Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and North Carolina. We're engaged in detailed and good conversations up in New England, Rhode Island, Connecticut in particular. But we're not just local state programs. We have been referenced in several federal publications. FEMA has published something called the P804, which is the Wind Retrofit Guide for Residential Buildings. That publication is our Fortified Home program. The Fortified was also mentioned in the Hurricane Sandy rebuilding strategy that was published immediately following Sandy's landfall, when HUD was asked to do a report, and we are named in the report that local communities should adopt and encourage fortified construction. Let's go ahead and go to the next page. So we have also partnered with FEMA and Department of Homeland Security to develop a resilience program called Resilience Star. Resilience Star is loosely based on the Energy Star concept. And the federal government is piloting that program now. We completed a Gulf Coast program pilot. They're looking at piloting in inland communities prone to wildfire next year. But we also do a lot of outreach through our Twitter, our Facebook, and social media. We do a lot of hazard-based and seasonal-based communicating and marketing on our website. So if you have a specific challenge that your company is interested in dealing with, there's a good chance that we have publications and good content that you can leverage either in your training courses or in your company's communications to its insureds. Let's go ahead to the next one. and lots and lots of resources. If you go to Fortified Home or Fortified on our website, you'll find a resources page, and on there we have all kinds of collateral there that runs the gamut from very, very technical to easily understood by the layman. So it's, we've got dense documents that are 90 pages long that nerds like me like to read, and then we've got rack cards that have graphics and just that are perfect for homeowners and folks that really aren't interested in the details, just want to know what the program is all about. So you can find all of that stuff on our Fortified Marketing Resources page there. Let's go for the next one. So that concludes the prepared material I have, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions that the group might have.
Great. Thank you so much, Fred. And we still have quite a few people here, so go ahead and use the question box or raise your hand. And we have Jerry who has a question, so I'm going to unmute your line, Jerry. How are you today?
Good. And yourself?
Good, good. Welcome.
Well, thank you. I'm just curious as to how many companies are members, and if you know if any of them also have discounts for their customers for Fortified Homes.
So we represent about 87% of the property insurers and reinsurers in the country. So we've almost 500 members. So we cover a lot of the industry. And many of them do have incentives. Unfortunately, because of competitive reasons, they don't always share what those rate filings are, those incentives are, except for where they're legally required to do that in Alabama, Mississippi, North Carolina, Georgia. But yes, the short answer is several of our member companies have incentives for Fortified. They do file those incentives in many different states, but unfortunately I don't know where all those are until I start getting phone calls from people.
I understood you're easily trying to convince people that for safety purposes it's a good thing to do. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, the reality is most people need some kind of a cost savings in order to do it.
Mm-hmm.
There's no question, and I deal with that every day, all day. But one of the things that I find that is compelling, and when I get out and I talk to homeowners, whether I'm talking to somebody who's recently experienced a claim, or I'm talking to somebody who's building new or potentially putting on a new roof, I take a lot of these videos with me, and I run them through the video, and I say, listen, let's take the water intrusion video for example. There may not be an incentive available for you here that would put money back in your pocket. But if I could tell you that for $500 you have the potential to reduce a possible claim by this much, I mean, would that be interesting to you? And a lot of times people will respond to it because it's just an act of education, right? And it's a matter of knowing all of the information that you should to make an informed decision. And that's really what Fortified Wise is designed to do. That's what this training is designed to do, is to help you guys become aware, so that when you are talking either directly or indirectly through the folks that you train about Fortified, that people at least have the information to make an informed decision with those discretionary dollars.
Great. Thank you, Jerry, for your question. And we have another question from Kimberly. Are training classes ever run at the facility, specifically the wind tunnel? That sounds fun.
So we do probably about a half a dozen and sometimes more training classes at our South Carolina research facility. Whenever we do classes at our research facility, we do give tours of the entire campus, and we go into the wind tunnel, and we walk up in those and look at those fans. So it's a pretty cool place to go see our training, or to attend our training and go see our site. The only thing I can't guarantee is that we'll actually be blowing something apart, burning something down, or breaking it up with hail. Those projects are generally big projects that are spaced out quite a bit. But getting to just see the site in person is impressive. That wind tunnel that I showed you, or that you saw in the video, that's 192 by 192 by 70 feet. So it's a huge building. And we have a big giant turntable in there that is used to, in other applications, it's used to rotate locomotives. around, so we can actually rotate houses 360 degrees in that wind tunnel, and it's pretty cool stuff to see in person.
Well, I imagine when you are getting ready to launch a new test that it's a high demand, a very restricted audience. I mean, how many people can you accommodate to be able to observe those events?
Yeah, so we have a viewing room that is directly adjacent to the wind tunnel, and it's always funny to watch people's reaction when buildings are coming apart and the debris is flying at the windows, how they're not quite sure that they're safe, but they are completely safe. But our viewing room accommodates about 80 people, and then we have other rooms that are around the campus where they have video feeds that can be used. But yeah, it's generally a very limited audience, and oftentimes when we do those big events, we're bringing media in, like the Today Show, the Weather Channel, and other media outlets to be able to take that information and broadcast it out to the larger public. So those folks take up a lot of that space when they come.
That's great. Well, Fred, we appreciate your time today and sharing your expertise and knowledge and resources available to trainers and educators. We wish all of you a great weekend. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving.